Do you think Trump's White House dream is over? Do you think he's played all of his hands and is out of luck? I'm David English, this is the English Channel. Let's dive in and have a look. I hope this video finds you all well and good, folks, and that you've enjoyed your holiday time with your friends and family. Now, if you're like me, you've probably had discussions here in the UK about the election in the US, and you've probably heard everybody say, well, the election is done and he's out of the White House. But also, if you're curious like me, you've probably looked at this story a little more closely and realised that this isn't over yet, not by a long shot. And it's not as simple as the UK mainstream media are making out. In fact, the mainstream media have oversimplified and overhyped Biden's case so much that they don't want to admit or even let you know that there is a certain process you have to go through to challenge elections in the United States. And no matter how much the media and corrupt political elements try to subvert that, the path laid out in the American Constitution for settling these disputes must be followed. Now, in my previous videos, I talked about the oddities of the election, the legal process through the courts, and the origin of the election interference itself. And in this episode, I would like to talk about the remaining paths left available to Trump should the Supreme Court path fail and what may happen next in the coming weeks. Now, the Founding Fathers were quite ingenious and embedded into the Constitution, together with acts and executive orders passed over the years, several options available to the people in the event of a possible subversion of an election and corruption in one, multiple, or even all branches of government. Now, the initial route in a situation of a disputed election is to go through the courts all the way to the Supreme Court. However, in the event that the Supreme Court decides to not rule on the case, it would be passed to the House for a mini-election, with each state having one nominee each. In this situation, it's quite likely Trump would win, as the Republicans actually hold more states than the Democrats. A similar thing would happen in the Senate for the vice presidential nominee, and again, Trump would win here. However, there are still other eventualities that may occur. Now, when I discussed the electors in my video on Trump's legal challenges, I mentioned a situation where a state can have two slates of electors presented. So in an ordinary electoral process, when the state presents their electors, they are received by the vice president, in this case, Mike Pence. But in the event that a state presents disputed electors, which could happen in at least 7 states this time around, the vice president, under the 12th Amendment of the US Constitution, can actually refuse to count the electoral votes from disputed states. The 12th Amendment actually states, the President of the Senate, i.e. the Vice President, shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates of the electoral votes of the states, and the votes shall then be counted. Traditionally, this has been interpreted that the Vice President passes on the votes to be counted, but some are arguing that the language actually means that the Vice President should count the votes before passing before Congress. In an October 19 essay at The American Mind, John Yoo, a law professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and Robert J. Dillahunty, a law professor at St. Thomas University, said that it is unclear is who is to count the electors' votes and how their validity is to be determined. We suggest that the Vice President's role is not the merely ministerial one of opening the ballots and then handing them over to whom to be counted. Though the 12th Amendment describes the counting in the passive voice, the language seems to envisage a single continuous process, in which the Vice President both opens and counts the votes. In this scenario, Pence could effectively reject the votes from the disputed states and choose the alternative slates of electors instead. This would, of course, give Trump the overall majority he needs to win re-election. Now, what happens in the situation that the election fraud and foreign interference is proven to be real, which is becoming increasingly more likely, or that certain branches of government are proven to be corrupted, such as the Supreme Court? Well, in those situations, the president has the use of certain powers granted to him under the Insurrection Act of 1807 and the Executive Order 13848, signed into law by Trump in September 2018. The Insurrection Act was primarily designed to allow the president to use the military to retain order in the event of an uprising, coup, or rebellion. In the context of the current election, scholars argue that the act could be used to allow the president to seize voting machines and registers in order to conduct a thorough audit to make sure the election wasn't tampered with by enemies, domestic or foreign. It is less severe than martial law, which has also been called for from some quarters, but there may still be another way. Trump likes to do things by the law and the constitutional process because he is, after all, a servant of the people. And even in instances where he's being investigated, or indeed the federal government is investigating others, he stays out of the way and doesn't really interfere. He hands it over to the correct branch of government and lets it run its course. And the same may be true here. In September of 2018, Trump signed Executive Order 13848, imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in a United States election. It's a slightly less nuclear option than the Insurrection Act, but it allows Trump to use the branches of the federal government to seize assets and property related to interference in the election, both domestic and foreign, and any other measures authorized by law. The executive order explains that after an election has taken place, a review of the election will be conducted by the Director of National Intelligence in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate executive departments and agencies, and delivered to the President no later than 45 days after the election. If it is found that foreign interference has indeed taken place, then the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence have 30 days to develop a framework for the process that will be used to carry out their respective responsibilities. In essence, they have 30 days to decide on a plan of action and how best to tackle what has occurred. Now, under this executive order, the President has given the Treasury the power to seize assets, both physical and financial. This is becoming particularly relevant as more and more questions are arising around the use of the Dominion Smartmatic voting machines. A recent audit of the Dominion machines, and released by a judge in Michigan County on December 14th, revealed the machines had an intentional error rate of over 68%. Now, the State Election Commission allows an error rate of just 0.0008%. The 23-page forensic report concluded that the Dominion voting system is intentionally and purposefully designed with inherent errors to create systematic fraud and influence election results. This comes as recent investigations by the Epoch Times have found worrying links between Dominion and the CCP, as well as a public admission by a CCP academic who states that they not only support Biden financially, but also had the Trump problem fixed with the help of old friends in the US. Now, the report, which will be delivered by the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, has been delayed until January. But Ratcliffe has admitted that China, Iran and Russia did in fact interfere in the US election. In an interview published in the Wall Street Journal on December 3rd, Ratcliffe said the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, poses the greatest threat to America today, and the greatest threat to democracy and freedom worldwide since World War II. The intelligence is clear. Beijing intends to dominate the US and the rest of the planet economically, militarily and technologically, he wrote. Many of China's major public initiatives and prominent companies offer only a layer of camouflage to the activities of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this shows how serious and how worrying the situation really is. If national elections are open to the highest bidder, no nation will ever be free again. China will rule them all. Now, the reason Trump may have to use this executive order is not only as a matter of national security, but also because so far the Democrats have obstructed any monitoring, oversight or investigation into any part of this election process. They have used every dirty trick in the book, going as far as preventing anonymous witnesses from being revealed in court, to then having the same court case thrown out because all the witnesses remained anonymous. And there are countless examples of these kinds of tactics. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, the question has to be asked, what are they afraid of? If it was truly the fair and honest election they claim, they would willingly allow any investigation as they would be proud of their victory. You would think they would want to rub salt in the wounds of their enemy. But the truth is they are obstructing any and every measure that the American people demand to see that their election process is fair and honest. In reality, the only reason someone behaves like this is because they have something to hide. At the end of the day, lies and deceit cannot stand the light and scrutiny of truth and justice. But it's my firm belief justice will prevail once more in the United States. Because ultimately, it's not the president that they have to answer to, or even the Senate or the Congress. It's the American people. And that's not just a message that's been lost in America. That's a message that's been lost the world over. And this isn't just a fight between Republicans and Democrats. This is a fight between the people and the corrupt political establishment. For ultimately, the power lies in the hands of the people. And as we find ourselves in one of the darkest chapters in humanity's long history, that's a battle many of us around the world are facing right now. So what can we do? As we stand at this precipice of a new year and indeed a new epoch, we can make a stand for truth and justice. We can switch off the corrupt corporate news organisations and seek independent and truthful news like the Epoch Times, NTD Television, Newsmax, OAN and many, many others. We can seek out independent journalists and media and make informed choices about our future without relying on the dictates of career politicians who don't really have our best interests at heart. And we can start by finding out what really happened in the biggest heist in history. The plan to steal America. So what do you think will happen? Do you think Congress will ultimately resolve the issue, or will Trump have to go nuclear? Please leave a comment below. And if you like the video, don't forget to smash the like button, press subscribe and share this far and wide. The more truthful content we spread, the bigger and better this great awakening becomes. I've been David English, you've all been great, and I'll see you all on the next dive into the English Channel.